like to call the meeting of the Governing Board of Liberty Elementary School District for Monday, March 6th to order. Present at tonight's meeting is Board Member Parks, Board Member Aguirre, Board Member Bixler, Board Member Kenyon, and myself, Michael Todd. Our next item on the agenda will be for the Pledge of Allegiance. Board Member Aguirre, could you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item on the agenda is 2.1. It's consideration of proposals received from consulting firms for interim superintendent search and board interviews of consulting firms' representatives. We have two organizations presenting tonight. The first will be HYA, and the second will be the Arizona School Board Association. Mr. John Bash from HYA is present first. I would just, 1 second, I'd just like to thank you for your interest in supporting Liberty Elementary School District and finding an interim superintendent. We have a total of 4 companies such as yours who will be represented, who will be presenting to us over the next 2 nights. Some factors considered will be the overall cost, the firm's verbal presentation, their ability to quickly identify candidates for the board to consider, the firm's proposed process, the firm's ability to support the district if the candidate for interim superintendent does not work out, as well as each panel member's overall review of the presentation. Each panel member will take notes and provide a ranking between 1 and 4, which will be considered by the board when selecting the winning firm. I would like to personally thank our panel members, Ms. Kelly Zimmerman, a parent from Estrella Mountain, Mr. Paul Jensen, who appears to not be here, he's a parent from Rainbow Valley, Ms. Morgan Farr, a parent from Liberty Elementary, Ms. Sarah Brandel from West Star, a parent, support staff Minnie Camerata from Estrella, and then for your information, the board members are as called out, Mr. Brian Parks, Mark Aguirre, Paul Bixler, Chris Kenyon, and myself. Moving forward, the process to be followed. Each company will be allowed up to 15 minutes to present to the board. Each of our board members has submitted 2 questions, which I will ask you at the end of your presentation. We anticipate this to last approximately 20 minutes. The final 10 minutes will be given to allow the panel a chance to ask for clarification on any information you have provided during your presentation or in response to the questions you have been asked. This will not be a time for new, unrelated questions. Ready for you.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Who came up with the process of what you had talked about, scoring 1 through 4, some of the factors that were going to be taken into place?
Those are just exemplary factors, sir. You can take any notes that you want, and those were just some examples of what board members may be looking for. We spoke with procurement, and procurement advised that this would be the best process within the district to follow, so that's what we took.
So when you say procurement, you're talking
The procurement of our district.
who is,
Tara Sheehan. She's present.
because this is the first time I've heard of this, like presented as a board member to me. I just want to make a note of that.
Can I just clarify that I didn't have anything to do with coming up with questions, but I did suggest the ranking method. Because,
Can you please come to the mic so it's a matter of record?
so I just suggested the ranking method because we don't have an existing evaluation rubric for this kind of search. And with, this is worth 100 points, this is worth 50 in like a detailed scoring system. And since we rank, we call it Heisman ranking, when we do quotes so that we can sort of level for outliers. I thought a ranking system made sense here because it's, 4 firms.
Yeah, no worries. I was just wanted to make sure it was public record that me as a board member, I was never heard any opinion on how this was going to go.
Okay.
Mr. Bash, please go ahead. And I think, do you guys have the timer running just so he can keep track? There should be a timer that comes up for you, sir, as well, so you can just time check where you're at in the 15-minute mark.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is John Bash. I'm with Hazard Young Atea and Associates. We're a national search firm. I'm based in Tucson and Washington State, conducting searches all along the West Coast and a bit inland. I've prepared a one-page summary I'd like to hand out that, given a 15-minute window, might make it a little easier for you to track what I'm about to share. So if it's okay to approach.
Yes, sir.
So again, Hazard Young Atea, a national search firm in business since 1987. Since that time, over 1,600 superintendent or executive searches nationwide. We serve districts large and small. My particular area of interest is in working with smaller school districts, including those that are K-6, K-8, or K-12. I'm currently working with a charter school serving just under 200 students in New Mexico as they look for a director of their operation. So I was intrigued when this opportunity presented itself, and that's part of the motivation around our firm coming to you was my geographic location to you and the work that I've already done. Our firm's deeply committed to diversity in recruiting and finding candidates that represent the demographics as much as possible in your school district. In 2022-23, you'll see on the one pager I just handed out the breakdown of underrepresented candidates that we've slated. That means that we recruited and developed a list of candidates that included this representation in the slate. Not necessarily folks selected, but those that we put together for governing boards to consider. We are proactive in our recruitment, meaning we don't just advertise and wait for people to apply. We're very aggressive in actively pursuing and doing outreach in a variety of ways to prospective candidates, especially with the market as it is now. There continues to be a strong demand for high quality leaders and not quite enough of those quality leaders to fill the pace of vacancies that we're seeing. And so it really becomes incumbent on any search firm you select to really be proactive and competitive in doing that outreach to generate a quality pool for you to choose from. 75% of the superintendents that we place were recruited. They weren't folks who simply applied for a job. We pride ourselves on national exposure. So our HYA posting website not only lists the jobs that we're directly assisting school systems with, but all of our competitors' postings as well. And the simple logic there is the more opportunities we post, the more people we attract to our website, which gets 25,000 views per month nationwide. 94% of the superintendents we place stay more than 3 years in their role, and that's primarily for comprehensive searches. I know we're here talking about an interim search process, which is by design temporary. But it is a hallmark of our firm. I'm one of 135 associates nationwide, several of us here on the west side. And in our firm, if you want to serve in a role like mine, you may not be currently employed in a school district. Our firm expects that you're committing your full-time attention to this work, that you're not trying this as a side gig while you have a full-time job. So I'm retired after 35 years of service as a teacher, principal, district office administrator, and superintendent. I have overseen operations, all non-instructional operations, as well as the entire teaching and learning operation over 35 years. Of that 35-year career, 29 years was in school-level leadership or district-level leadership. I have just over 3 years of experience leading searches, including interim searches. Currently, I mentioned I'm assisting a district in New Mexico. I'm wrapping up a search in Washington State for a system roughly your size. And we have a proposal in for another search up in Washington. On the right side of the one-pager, in the introductory remarks, urgency was mentioned. And so in terms of timing, it really depends on what the desire of all of you is in terms of how quickly you want to turn around a pool of candidates, screen them, and select one. I also led with urgency because I watched your last board meeting and learned at that time that your former superintendent's no longer reporting, if I understood it correctly. So I'm assuming that there's some urgency to this search for you. Meaning finding an interim superintendent as soon as possible is a priority I'm assuming here as I talk about the proposal. I want to mention that I submitted the proposal on February 21st, and I want to compliment Tara. She's been great with communication and answering clarifying questions. I assumed urgency when I submitted it, so the timeline in the proposal includes some February dates that won't be possible. So what I can share with you is we can easily customize that for you, adapt it, and we do that together in our model. I don't tell you when you're going to do your search. We figure that out together, looking at calendar, your availability, our awareness of the market, and how much time we need to do a quality job of recruiting. In our process, that meeting would be our first step. I would need to meet with the governing board, determine your leadership priorities so I know what to tell prospective candidates in terms of what you're expecting, develop the position announcement with you, determine an advertising plan, and most candidates also want to know what you're willing to pay. So we need to determine a compensation range. I also, even in an interim search, like to schedule an individual conversation with each governing board member so that I get to know what inspired you to serve as a board member, what visions or interests each of you had individually in terms of wanting to serve, what strengths you see in the system currently, what challenges you believe your system is facing, so that I can fold that in to any themes that might emerge across all 5 of you and help any prospective candidate understand, okay, here's your board. When I do searches, I call it the 3 lights, and they are either red, yellow, or green. The 3 questions I get asked most often. John, tell me about the board. John, tell me about the budget. Are they healthy financially? John, tell me about the relationship between the district and their employees. And how healthy is that? What do you know? So those are all 3 things that a lot of candidates that are looking at opportunities want to know before they decide that they're interested. So during our individual conversations, I may explore that with you as well, get your perspective on those 3 questions. We then launch into recruiting and advertising consistent with the plan that you want me to follow. I will present a menu of options, much of which locally and regionally would be free of charge and included in our fee based on memberships you likely have with the Arizona School Board Association. And I assume administrators in your district belong to the Arizona School Administrators Organization, both of which post openings like this on their websites. I'd also work with your staff to create a search page on your district website and assist with content for that, again, based on our planning conversation. After recruiting and advertising begins, as candidates apply, Our firm does candidate screening along the way. Once we receive a completed application, we do a thorough review. We look at references that they've submitted. We begin contacting references to do confirming reference checks. Given our network of associates, we also reach out to folks in our network that might know the candidate who are not included on their reference list so that we can get as much intelligence for you regarding the candidate as possible. We do a news story search online to find out if there's any skeletons in the closet that a board member would want to be aware of. And if we find that, we copy the link, we give a quick summary, but we make sure you have access to read the story and arrive at conclusions yourself as you're screening candidates. We do a social media search in as much as we can identify individuals there. Our application form asks folks to disclose what social media presence they have, and that's what drives our review of what kind of things candidates are posting on social media, so you're also aware of that. With our candidates who appear as qualified in the application, we do what we call a pre-screening interview before we present the slate of candidates to you. And what that interview is generally about a half dozen questions that are pretty common to the superintendent's scope of responsibility. And we may also include some things that we learned from you in terms of what the greatest needs are for leadership in your district. And then we do some housekeeping with them. What are their expectations for compensation? When are they available to start? What background experience do they have that might align with what you're looking for? Is there anything in their background that we should know about? I ask this question that might be of concern for a school board so that we get that out of the way. And if the answer is yes, we ask them to prepare a written statement, and we include that in their application materials for you to review firsthand. Beyond that, then, we present a slate of candidates for you. You decide who you'd like to interview from that slate, and then we schedule and conduct interviews. I would be present with you to help host the interviews and make sure I work with your staff team here to make sure logistics and questions, materials, everything's ready to go for you and well organized. We offer an independent background check beyond the reference check I described, a company that goes into far more depth than we're able to, extensive criminal history, a deeper social media dive, credit check, degree verification, and other things. And there is a fee for that additional background check. So we will make the governing board aware of those options. And then contract negotiations begins. We do not serve as an agent of the district in negotiating with candidates. That's between whomever you designate from the governing board, and typically your legal counsel is involved in that. The only role we will play, if asked, is to help with ideas on how to help both parties reach some sort of mutual agreement if needed. I'm going to say about 30% of the time we're asked, about 70% of the time, that process goes pretty smoothly between the two parties. Our fee is $5,000 for the interim search process I've just described, plus travel expenses. I would expect those to be minimal given my location in Tucson, and we do not charge for meals. There is optional national advertising that was in our proposal. Again, those are choices we could talk about in the planning meeting. So there's my one pager, and I have 56 seconds to spare. How about that?
Thank you. If you're ready, we have some questions that were submitted by our board members.
Sure.
We'll ask all candidates the same questions. And there's 10, so we'll try to get through them all. Number one, would you be able to find an executive with MBA/business and education experience?
If that became a search target, we have encountered candidates with a business background. I will admit it's unusual to find a package where somebody has an MBA, but they've chosen an education pathway as an educator. More commonly, we find that somebody who has provided service on the business side of a school district might emerge as an interested candidate if the board is open to considering someone who doesn't have a traditional teacher, principal, school district, educational pathway. So it's possible, but that combination is not common. It's less common.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you make sure we have a candidate that has true leadership qualities and is not a micromanager? The 3 Ps.
Great question. And when I do conversations with board members, that's frequently a request that they have, that we don't want somebody to come in and be looking over the shoulder of folks or not be able to let go of things, especially they used to do if they've never been a superintendent before. And so the way we screen for that is, number one, we ask those questions in reference checks. And often we will call references that include staff who are subordinate to that person. So if they've been a leader before, we do our best to identify somebody either in the recent past or in their present district who reports to that person, and we ask them directly, would you describe this person as a micromanager? Or how do you describe this person's supervision and evaluation approach of your work? Do you consider them supportive? Do you feel like this person enables you to grow professionally? Those kinds of things.
Great. Question number 3. What is your in-state pool of candidates like for an interim position?
In-state, well, I can share with you that when I first moved to Arizona 3 years ago, I added my name to the Arizona School Board Association roster for interim superintendents. And I know they're here tonight, and I would expect they will share with you that they maintain a roster of people that do that work. So I don't have a roster like that in Arizona, so I give deference to the School Board Association and let you know if you're in a significant rush to find somebody, that may be your best bet in terms of a ready pool, because they recently reached out to me and asked, do you want to remain on that list, so they keep it fresh as well. So if it sounds like I'm advertising for them, I'm just being transparent with you and letting you know that that's something they do and something I'm aware of. Do I have a list of Arizona candidates? We have recent candidates from the Southwest area, including Arizona, in our database of applications that I would start with. What I can't tell you tonight is, have they accepted a position? Are they still looking? Those are all things we research if you select us to help you. And we start as close to home here as possible with our process.
Thank you. Next question. What do you find is the most important thing a board can do to assure success in this process?
Be crystal clear about what you expect, which is why I shared the design of the process. Particularly if there's a sense that there might be some dissonance among board members regarding where the district is headed, at least in the short term, the best thing a 5-member school board can do is figure out, okay, what are the top 2 or 3 things we want this interim leader to deliver for us? What can the 5 of us agree on that we want to see accomplished by the end of June, if that's when the contract wraps up, or by the end of May? I don't know what your timeline is for the employment window. And typically, the transition meeting that occurs with the person you select includes some norming conversations around, okay, how is it you want me to communicate with you? So be really clear about what you expect in terms of the superintendent communicating with board members. And those workshops can take up to 3 or 4 hours at times just to cover all the key pieces that go with a governing board's expectations. How do you want me to prepare you for each board meeting? If the bus is in an accident, but nobody's injured, what rises to that litmus test where you expect me to contact each board member and keep you informed of what's going on in the district? Or does that rise to the level? When do we delay school or cancel school due to inclement weather? All those things. So there's a long list of transition kinds of conversations that I think need to occur in order for a good working relationship between the board and the next superintendent to unfold for you.
Question number 5, with whom specifically will the district work from your organization, and what are their backgrounds?
You primarily would work with me. That's why I'm here this evening. In a smaller district search, I also activate the support of at least 1 or 2 other associates to help me on the recruiting side. So beyond just me digging into files and records, I have folks who will dig in and recruit for me. The other thing is I immediately notify the 134 folks that are also doing this work nationwide that we're conducting the search. If you know of anybody who is interested in this region or interested in an opportunity like this, please let me know. In an interim search, we also specifically target retired folks because often if they're newly retired, they can walk in the door with a great deal of competence and experience and deliver for you on safety, on operational management, on the kinds of things that they don't need to learn. They can hit the ground running just in terms of keeping your operation moving forward. So often retired people are become the interim superintendents. Nationwide, that market is shrinking, but they're still out there. So our goal would be to market your opportunity as an attractive one, given the work that you're doing.
Okay, question 6, has any previous client terminated their relationship with your firm prior to completion of the search agreement, and what was the outcome?
Our firm, in the last 10 years, has shared 3 examples, and they were all very large district searches, where the governing council or board decided to end the search, and there were 3 different reasons. One had to do with an internal candidate that the board decided they just wanted to offer the position to, despite the fact that our firm had generated a list of prospective candidates and presented that slate to the board. I don't remember the exact circumstances of the other 2, and I don't want to make it up. So what I can do is provide you those details. What I know about all 3 is we had delivered on everything we promised in the contractual agreement in terms of scope of services. It was the district that decided to terminate the process, not due to our work, but due to circumstances within their district that led them to that decision. Those are the only 3 examples that come to mind in response to your question.
Number 7, has your organization completed more than one search for a client? Who and where?
Well, I'll just jump to my most recent service, the Monroe School District in Washington State, north of Seattle. Invited us to assist them last July with their interim superintendent search. That's a district of just over 6,000 students. We were able to find in 3 weeks' time a very competent retired superintendent who is serving there until June. And because of their satisfaction with our interim service, they selected us to do their comprehensive search, which we just wrapped up in February of this year. So that's the latest example. There are many examples that I could share.
Thank you. Our next question, what would happen in the event the interim superintendent is selected, begins working with our district, but leaves unexpectedly and doesn't fulfill the terms of the contract prior to a permanent superintendent being identified? How would your search firm fill that gap?
Well, That's a good question. We certainly would be disappointed to hear of that scenario unfolding. And I just haven't seen that because the vetting we do on the screening side, that one red flag we look for in applications right away is how many years has a person served in each of their prior roles? And if it's 1 year and then 2 years and then 1 year, that's a red flag for most boards, and it's a pretty significant red flag for us. Our practice is to contact that candidate, and that's one of the questions we ask. Hey, your resume looks like you're jumping quite a bit. Can you help us understand why that's the case? And we listen to their story and we pass that along to, the board to consider. The only other reason I can come up with that somebody might leave is if either they got in over their head and they weren't able to literally do the work in a competent fashion, and you as a governing board decide this isn't working, in which case, while we don't have a guarantee in this interim proposal, I would be happy to approach our company and say, look, this didn't work out. Can we circle back and look at the slate if there were other candidates that you thought were viable, or do we go back to re-advertising, reposting? So that's something I'd be willing to discuss with you if it unfolded. But my main answer for you on that question is we just haven't had that happen because we try to really look hard at each candidate before you make a decision on hiring them. It's a big decision.
Thank you. Next question. Due to our current state of affairs with our administration cabinet, we are in a time crunch. What will your search firm do to expedite finding an interim superintendent without sacrificing quality?
Yeah, I think I addressed part of that in the presentation, but I would just tell you, this is a simplified search proposal that we're giving you because we want to get right after it. And that's why we'd start with you, develop the advertisement, get it out there as soon as possible, and then carefully screen and vet who applies. Once we had some candidates for you to look at that we felt were competent and capable, we would want to post this job until filled. So rather than a specific, like a 5 or 6 week application deadline, you don't have that kind of time. So we would want to post this position until filled, which means once you find sufficient applicants that appear to be qualified to do this work, we then commence with scheduling interviews and get on with it. And so that's the approach we take where there's urgency like you have.
Thank you. Next question is, what is the role of the superintendent versus what is the role of the school board?
In most training that I've been through over almost 4 decades now, they call it the policy line, that the governing board's role is policy development and visioning for the school district, strategic planning at a high level, and the superintendent's job is to implement those goals and strategic priorities that the governing board has outlined and tend to the day-to-day operations of the district. In my experience, the governing board hires and fires one person. The superintendent is responsible for every other employee in terms of the HR operation in the district. So that's our paradigm. And I have done workshops with governing boards and superintendents on that very topic to help clarify, particularly for new boards, what is the role of a board member? Again, your state school board association is here tonight. I am confident they also provide that kind of guidance and training to Arizona boards like yours. So that's my simplified answer.
Thank you. And it looks like one of our board members added a third question because we have number 11. So I'm going to ask it. Not sure where that came, but it's what would be some examples of where the school board is undermining the job of the superintendent?
Okay. I haven't had that question before. So I'll give you a scenario. You're a board member, you're in the grocery store, somebody comes up to you in the line and says, My child's third grade teacher disciplined my kid today and I want her fired. And the board member takes that information and calls the teacher, okay? That's where the board member just crossed the line into the superintendent's realm of work, where instead, certainly you want to listen to your constituents, but the response to that person in the grocery store should be, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that you're upset. The next step for you in resolving this is to speak with the teacher. Did you get a chance to do that? Well, yes, but I wasn't satisfied. Okay, well, your next step then is the principal. And that's generally one of the norms I mentioned earlier that you figure out with your superintendent so that there's the opportunity for your staff to resolve these issues when they come up. Board members who take that on themselves undermine the authority of not just the superintendent, but teachers and principals as well. So that's the example that pops into my head.
Thank you. That concludes our interview process. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for your time and that of your firms. We anticipate making a decision tomorrow evening, and we'll ensure that you are informed of the outcome of the process. Do you have
Thank
any
you
other
so much.
questions?
Good luck with your decision.
Okay, members, if I can ask that we take about a 10-minute break to let the next presenter set up and make sure their deck is ready. We'll plan to reconvene here at about 6:15, if that works. You don't have two in your folder? So we'll reconvene at 6:15 if everybody agrees. Okay. Okay, we'll show that we're back in session at 6:16. Members, a little housekeeping. I apologize, we did not ask if there were any questions from the members, follow-up questions. We did have one that came from one of our community members. What I would suggest is that we can probably email these questions to each of our candidates. If we want to do it that way, we can do that, or we can move on without asking questions of any further candidates. So we'll get legal advice on that, and that's how we'll move forward on there. If there are questions, we may have to do that in a written form, and we'll find out the best way to handle that. So next up is Ms. Tracy Benson from Arizona School Board Association. We have just a little introduction for you. I'd like to thank you for your interest in supporting the Liberty Elementary School District and finding an interim superintendent. We have a total of 4 companies, such as yours, who will be presenting to us over the next 2 nights. Some factors considered will be the overall cost, the firm's verbal presentation, their ability to quickly identify candidates for the board to consider, the firm's proposed process, the firm's ability to support the candidate if the candidate for interim superintendent does not work out, as well as each panel member's overall review of the presentation. Each panel member will take notes and provide a ranking between 1 and 4, which will be considered by the board when selecting the winning firms. The panel members are as follows. Ms. Kelly Zimmerman, a parent from Estrella Mountain. Mr. Paul Jensen, a parent from Rainbow Valley. Ms. Morgan Farr, a parent from Liberty Elementary. Ms. Sarah Brandel, a parent from West Star. And Ms. Minnie Camerata, who's a part of our support staff at Estrella Mountain Elementary. Our board members are Brian Parks, Mark Aguirre, Paul Bixler, Chris Kenyon, and myself, Michael Todd. Process will be as follows. Each company will be allowed up to 15 minutes to present to the board. Each of our board members has submitted 2 questions, which I'll ask you at the end of your presentation. We anticipate this to last approximately 20 minutes. I'd like to clarify that one board member did add a 3rd question. It was on here, so we asked the last one, so there'll actually be 11 questions. We did plan for the final 10 minutes to be allowed for the panel a chance to ask for clarification of any information you provided during the presentation or in response to your questions you have been asked. I think we will forego that because we missed that on the last opportunity. We'll consult with legal, and if we need to, we can send you some written questions for feedback.
Mr. President, I would agree with that. I think that we would have a problem with the consistency of our effort here if we added that now.
I agree.
Where the first one didn't, so
Right.
I agree. We should not have it.
Correct. We'll omit that, and if legal says we can do email questions, then we can email them questions if that's what the board chooses. So with that, we've got a timer set for you, 15 minutes, help you out. I think you can see it on, can you see it on your screen right there?
Here,
Okay.
yes, I do.
And we'll turn it over to you, and then we'll ask our questions at the end.
Alrighty, thank you. Thank you, President Todd, members of the board, community members, and staff member for being here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to be retained as the search firm for your search for an interim superintendent. My name's Tracy Benson. I'm the Associate Executive Director and the Search Administrator for the Arizona School Boards Association. The Arizona School Boards Association is a private nonprofit organization, and one of our key supports and services that we provide to school boards throughout the state of Arizona is a superintendent search service. It is arguably one of the most important decisions that a school board will make, so it's our honor and privilege to be able to support our members as they're making such an important decision. This evening in this presentation, I'm going to provide you with an overview of our search service. Throughout, I hope you'll see that the hallmarks of our service are collaboration, board-driven decision-making, and a transparent process. I'm going to start by sharing the typical timelines for superintendent searches. Typically, a comprehensive search for a permanent superintendent takes 12 to 14 weeks. That's 4 weeks for what we call the discovery phase, which goes concurrently with the application and recruiting and advertising phase. Typically, the best time to begin a search such as that is January or February of the year. For an interim superintendent search, a short-term, what we might call emergency search, that takes a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks. we submitted a proposal on February the 13th that provided a timeline based on that date. And you'll see on that it was a 4-week search process. That's a compressed application period. Typically, it requires 3 to 4 search-related meetings of the governing board, depending on whether the board chooses to have a single interview for the candidate or 2 interviews. And that interim superintendent search process, as I proposed it, doesn't include the typical community input that would be part of a full comprehensive search. The interim search does, however, include most of the phases of a full comprehensive search, just in a compressed timeline, as I mentioned. The comprehensive search has 7 phases. The interim search has 5 phases. I'm going to go through the components of each of these for you as we move through the presentation. But phase 1, which occurs in meeting 1, is really developing the profile, what the governing board and the community is looking for in terms of an interim superintendent, establishing the timeline for the search. And typically, if it was a comprehensive search, we would be sharing opportunities for community engagement that the governing board could consider. Phase 2 is part of the comprehensive search, the typical comprehensive search. We call that the discovery phase, which includes a community online survey and community input sessions. Those could be available to you for an interim search depending on your timeline for that, but in a compressed short-term interim search, that typically wouldn't be a part of it. But also in phase 2, whether it's if looking for a permanent superintendent or an interim superintendent, that would be the application period. Phase 3, meeting 2 of the board, would be where the board would review all the applicants for the interim position and select applicants to interview. Phase 4, meeting 3, the board interviews those selected candidates. Depending on the preference of the board could choose to do a single round of interviews or move on to a second finalist stage for interviews. That would take place in phase 5, meeting 4. At that point, the board would determine who they would be entering into negotiations with for that interim superintendent position, which occurs in phase 6. At that point in the process, ASBA steps back and lets the governing board work with your legal counsel to determine the different aspects of that particular contract. And then typically in a search, we engage with the board in the transition phase, and that is helping the board and the new superintendent establish a foundation for their relationship moving forward through a facilitated dialogue session. In a comprehensive search, we also work with the board and the district to help them introduce their new leader, CEO, superintendent to the community. So specific aspects of this process. In the interim superintendent search process, we will work with you to develop what we call the position profile. That's going to include all of the required experience and qualifications that you desire in your interim superintendent, any areas of specialty knowledge that you need, whether that's curriculum and instruction or finance. And that position announcement will also include preferred applicant attributes. That could be anything from being a great listener to having experience, again, in a particular area. Also, as part of that position profile, we share information, important information about the district itself, the community that you're serving, the programs that you have, to make sure that all of the candidates know what Liberty Elementary School District is all about. Also, as part of that position profile, we like to provide a range of what the compensation will be for that individual. And we can make recommendations to you based on our annual superintendent salary survey of superintendents from throughout Arizona. Then we launch into the advertising and recruiting phase. We use our database of candidates, those who are interested in permanent positions and those who have expressed interest to us in serving in an interim capacity. We use statewide education organizations to get the word out, sister school boards associations from around the country, as well as a key communicator network that we have established with leaders in the education field who have strong networks of both aspiring and experienced superintendents. And we also have a significant social media presence, including on LinkedIn, to target specific folks who match the experience that you're looking for through that social media platform. I mentioned community participation because I want to give you a snapshot of what this would look like. As I said, typically in a short, fast track interim search, this would not be a part of the process. But in a typical comprehensive superintendent search, ASBA is very proud of the transparency of our process and our interest in engaging the community to the degree that the board wants to. That includes the use of a research-based online survey about leadership characteristics of the individual that you're looking for, as well as an opportunity for the community to weigh in on what they'd like to see specifically in a superintendent candidate. They also can share on that online survey about what they think is going well in the district, that they'd like to see continue, and what challenges they think that your new administrator ought to be addressing. As part of both interim and comprehensive searches, our search consultant will call each and every one of the board members and ask you those questions as well as part of that discovery phase. So it ensures that each of your individual voices is accounted for as we're developing what we call the leadership profile, which we use to create a tool for you to screen applicants. In addition to all of the required and preferred qualifications that you identify in that profile, we'll also build a leadership profile that includes that, as well as each of your individual input. And when we're including community input, it will also include aspects of what the community desires as part of that leadership profile that you'll use to screen applicants. In a comprehensive search, we also offer the opportunity for you to host a community finalists forum where members of your community can meet the finalists and also pose questions to them that are on their mind. And all of the feedback that's provided during that session is brought to the governing board as you deliberate on who you'll choose as your finalists, as who you'll choose to enter into contract negotiations with. I've mentioned this process already, screening applicants, but something that's very important to me for you to know is that, as I said, it is board-driven decision-making. We very much believe in that, as well as transparency. So every person that applies for this position who meets those basic criteria, you're going to see them. We're not going to say, you got 12, but we think these 5 are the best. We're going to say, you got 12, and here they are. And let's use your leadership profile and your qualifications and let you make the decision. We'll also work with you to prepare interview questions and themes for those candidates based on, obviously, the position profile, but your leadership profile that you have developed with us. Candidates and finalist interviews, I want to let you know that we're with you throughout this whole process. We'll work with you to identify interview question themes, but also be with you in executive session when you are interviewing candidates as well, just to provide support and guidance. You're driving the process, you're asking the questions, but we're there at your side should you need us. I mentioned contract negotiations. This is where ASBA steps back and lets your legal counsel step in to work with you to tie up the bow on the package there. And then the transition plan. Again, this is part of the full search process where we come in and work with the governing board and the new administrator to ensure you have a solid foundation. While this isn't included in the proposal that I provided to you for the interim search, it's certainly available to you. And we think even with an interim position, it's important that you have that foundation of mutual understanding, mutual expectations, and also protocols for how your relationship with one another will work, because an interim is as important as a permanent. They're going to be your leader running your school district for a period of time. And so making sure that you, the governing board, has a strong relationship with them is going to be important no matter what. In the proposal that I provided with you, it shows that each of us has responsibilities to this process. The district has responsibilities that are related to confidentiality, to making sure that we, as your search consultant, have all the information that we need so that we can carry out our duties appropriately. And also that we are engaging in this process together in accordance with Arizona law, particularly Arizona open meeting law. To that end, I will tell you, we have, over the past 10 years, done about 100 searches. And so our processes, our agenda items, our ensuring that you are doing the pieces of the work that need to be done in public, and the pieces of the work that ought to be done in executive session are all things that we have absolutely vetted many times over across the state. So you can have confidence in that. I don't want to skip over our responsibilities because we certainly have plenty to you. And as I mentioned some of them at the beginning, ensuring board-driven decision-making and transparency being chief among them, but protecting confidentiality of the process, both of the applicants and the conversations that you have surrounding them, is paramount importance. And with that, I have a whole minute left. Gosh, what else should I say? I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, we have several, so here they go. First one is, would you be able to find an executive with an MBA/business and education experience?
I believe we would. That is a non-traditional background, certainly, but there are candidates like that who are out in the field. Hopefully we'd find someone who had that experience as well as educational experience with the school district, if that is what you were looking for. I mentioned our focus on social media in terms of recruiting. That's really, really important. And I don't know how involved you are with LinkedIn, but that platform has really become a hub for hiring and recruiting. And it provides some pretty robust tools for targeting individuals with certain backgrounds and experience and qualifications. So I believe using our networks and the tools at our disposal, we could do that.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you make sure we have a candidate that has true leadership qualities and is not a micromanager? The 3 Ps.
Well, I believe that is an essential part of the interview process. And that is really where we come in as a consultant working with you. Part of it is going backwards a little bit with reference checks and talking to folks in terms of reference checks who they've worked with in the past. But for those of you who have been part of a hiring process, sometimes those reference checks, they're good and they're important to do, but they're not going to be as revealing as the person's direct answers, I think, to very pointed questions that are related to that. So that would be our role, would be to help craft questions that would suss that out in candidate interviews.
Okay. Next question is, what is your in-state pool of candidates like for an intern position?
As I mentioned, we have a strong database of candidates who are both interested in permanent positions as well as interim positions. And I would say weekly we get new interest in our interim positions. You know, folks going on our website and submitting the online form we have there and letting us know that they're interested and available for those positions. I can't tell you the exact percentage that are in state and out of state, but I would say it's 50-50. You know, a lot of folks want to move to Arizona, and they may be retired superintendents or just looking to make a change, and they're from out of state and they're willing to take an interim position to get their foot in the door. In terms of our database of current superintendents or those who have applied for permanent positions, it weighs heavily towards the Arizona side. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Our next question is, what do you find is the most important thing a board can do to assure success in this process?
I believe it is having a common vision for what you are truly looking for in a superintendent. That goes beyond the basic qualifications of the candidate. So that really is where our discovery calls with each and every board member come into play, because when we are speaking with each, we know the basic qualifications you want. Maybe it is an MBA, maybe it's a master's in education, maybe it's a PhD, maybe it's classroom experience. But if we know there are some other attributes and qualities that you want to see in that applicant, and you're all aware of what those are when you're looking and reviewing applicants and also interviewing them, you're going to have a common understanding of what the end goal and the end game is that goes beyond just checking the box of 3 years of teaching experience and a doctorate in education.
Thank you. Next question. With whom specifically will the district work with from your organization, and what are their backgrounds? The two consultants, depending on the schedule of this interim search that you would work with, would be either Dr. Nick Clement or Dr. Mark Jornstad. Dr. Nick Clement is a 40-year educator. He retired in 2014 from the Flowing Wells School District in Tucson as a superintendent and immediately became the Ernest McFarland Chair, Citizens Chair in Education at Northern Arizona University. He has done 16 searches for ASBA. He is also a lead teacher and mentor with AASA, which is the National Superintendents Association. He has been known during his career as a serving superintendent as being very respectful and having excellent relationships with the boards that he has worked with. And he is someone we lean on heavily because of his great network nationally with both aspiring and experienced superintendents to support recruiting efforts. The other person, depending on the timeline that you may be working with, is Dr. Mark Jornstad. Dr. Mark Jornstad just retired from the Arizona Superintendents Association or School Administrators Association. He was a previous superintendent at one of your neighboring districts, relatively neighboring, Saddle Mountain Unified School District for 8 years. He was an all-Arizona superintendent for medium-sized districts. Liberty is considered a medium-sized district, so he knows your part of the world and district operations of districts your size. He currently is working to find a new superintendent for the Prescott Unified School District and the Ray Unified School District. Thank you. Our next question.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
In addition to those two who would be working with you as your lead search consultant, I'm a part of the process. I'm kind of the hub in the wheel as the search administrator. We also have a team of staff at ASBA that does all of the marketing, targeted recruiting on social media, and would also assist you with any kind of, assist the search with any kind of community involvement should you choose to do something like that.
Great. Thank you. Next question is, has any previous client terminated their relationship with your firm prior to completion of the search contract, and what was the outcome?
No.
That's easy. You picked up a little more time. Next question, number 7. Has your organization completed more than one search for a client, and who and where?
Because we have been doing searches for 40 years, yes, we have. Many, and we feel really proud of that fact, because districts and governing boards that we've done searches for have appreciated the process and have come back to us. They put their trust in us once, and they've come back to us again when it's time to hire a new superintendent.
Okay. Next question is, what would happen in the event the interim superintendent is selected, begins working with our district, but leaves unexpectedly and doesn't fulfill the terms of the contract prior to a permanent superintendent being identified? How would your search firm fill that gap?
Well, we could do a variety of things, and some of them are outlined in the proposal that I shared with you. It really depends on when this happened in the process, right? And what your projected timeline was for selecting a new superintendent. So as I mentioned, we've got a significant database of folks who are interested in being interim superintendents, and we'd reach out to that network and see if we could identify someone to come in and fill the position.
Okay. Next question is, due to our current state of affairs with our administration cabinet, we are in a time crunch. What will your search firm do to expedite finding an interim superintendent without sacrificing quality?
So the timeline that I identified for you in the proposal that I sent is a very tight timeline. It's a 4-week timeline. I originally submitted the proposal on February 13th, thinking that there was a meeting coming up. But I've since gone back and adjusted the timeline that is in this proposal. If we were selected as the firm this week, we would propose that we would begin next week, the week of March 13th, with meeting 1. And potentially, if we follow essentially the same time frame that was proposed in the original proposal, could potentially be doing finalist interviews for you by April the 14th.
Next question is, what is the role of superintendent versus what is the role of the school board?
The role of the school board is to set the vision, determine the mission of the organization, and set the overarching goals. Of course, one of the key roles is to hire the superintendent and evaluate the superintendent, to set policy, to establish budget and finances. The role of the superintendent is essentially, we consider it as your CEO. They're the ones who are going to manage day-to-day operations. They're going to provide oversight for staff. They're going to ensure that spending aligns with the budget that the board has set. They're going to ensure that the employees are following the policy that the board has adopted for the running of the school system. So they are the ones that you, as the governing board, look to for accountability. You say what you want, and you set the superintendent out to get that work done, hopefully with plenty of accountability and opportunities for check-ins built in to make sure that the superintendent fully understands what you are requiring and desiring, and that also you are getting the feedback and the information you need to determine that superintendent is carrying out the duties as you have set forth for them.
Thank you. Final question, what would be some examples of where the school board is undermining the job of the superintendent?
Well, I think a key one has to do with interactions with staff and directing staff to do things without working through the superintendent. The superintendent is your one employee, and you pay the superintendent good money, right, to get that work done. And so as a board, your expectation should be that that superintendent is working directly with staff to do the work that's required. And so I think that we see that that is sometimes where boards and superintendents get sideways, is when those lines of communication, which is essentially what that is, are broken down. That'd be one example.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our interview process. Thank you so much for coming tonight and your time and that of your firm. We anticipate making a decision tomorrow evening, and we'll ensure that you are informed of the outcome of the process. And as I stated, we missed the question period, the 10-minute question window for the first candidate, so we're going to hold off on that. We'll speak with our legal counsel and perhaps send you some email questions, and I'll ask the members of our committee to please email Athena tonight if you have any questions for any representatives, and then Athena will get a message, or we'll get an opinion from legal counsel tomorrow.
Great. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time. I appreciate you all.
Okay, once again, panel members who are parents and staff, thank you for your time in this. We certainly appreciate it. We know there's other things that you could be doing on a night off, but we value your opinions, and we'll have more tomorrow. What I would ask is that everybody submit all of your folders and binders back here. There's a box. I'll ask Ms. Camp to hold it. We'll collect all of your binders and paperwork. Nothing from tonight's meeting should leave the building, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow at the same time. And now I would just need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting? Oh, yes. Is there discussion on the adjournment? Okay, I have a motion and a second. 1 minute.
I made the motion, yep.
Okay.
I stand corrected, members. 2.2, possible action regarding allowance of virtual interviews of consulting firms. So what we need to do is we're going to need to vote down the adjournment and then come back to 2.2. So I will call the motion, and then we'll go back to 2.2, and thank you, staff, for catching that. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. When I call your name, please specify. Board Member Parks?
Nay.
Board Member Aguirre?
Nay.
Board Member Bixler?
Nay.
Board Member Kenyon?
No.
I'm also a nay. We will show that that failed. Now let's pick up 2.2, possible action regarding allowance of virtual interviews of consulting firms for interim superintendent search and related interim superintendent search process matters. Members, McPherson has asked to attend tomorrow night's meeting virtually. And so we need to make a determination if we will allow a virtual meeting of them or if we want their presentation to be in person.
So I can just say for me, I thought that I heard at one point that if they can't be here, they don't want the job that bad.
Understand. I think that was said, so we just need to ask if that's still how the board feels.
Mr. President, I also feel it's important that they show commitment by actually being here. I think that we gain quite a bit by facing them face to face.
Understood. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to deny virtual interviews of consulting firms of interim superintendent search and related interim superintendent search process matters.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to deny the requests for virtual interviews. I'll call your name. Please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Nay.
Board Member Aguirre?
Yes.
Board Member Bixler?
Yes.
Board Member Kenyon?
No.
I am also a yes. We'll show that approved 3 votes to deny the allowance of virtual interviews and 2 votes to support it. Now we can move to 3.1, adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre?
Aye.
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I am also an aye. We'll show that approved 5 votes yes, 0 votes no.